Once a young woman could enter high society by walking across a palace floor, curtsying to the monarch and backing away without turning her shoulders. It sounds like a scene from a costume drama. But for generations in Britain, this was a real social ritual. It was called being presented at court. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, elite families treated it as one of the great thresholds of a young woman's life. A debutante, usually from an aristocratic or upper-class background, was formally introduced to the sovereign at a court drawing room. After that, she was considered properly launched into society. The moment itself could be brief. The preparation was not. There were gowns to arrange, trains to manage, gloves, hair, chaperones, rules of movement, and most famously, the deep court curtsy. The debutante had to approach, bow low, and retreat with controlled grace. Contemporary descriptions make clear that many found the ritual nerve-wracking. One mistake would not ruin a life. But in a world built on reputation, it could be remembered. The strange part is how much meaning was packed into such a small ceremony. A few seconds in a palace could signal that a family belonged. It could open doors to balls, dinners, country houses, and introductions that mattered. The ritual did not create the British class system, but it made that system visible, polished, and ceremonial. This was not simply about manners, it was about access. The court presentation sat at the beginning of what became known as the season Enyan. For months, London society moved through a calendar of events where marriages, alliances, friendships, and fortunes could quietly be shaped. A debutante was not just attending parties, she was being placed inside a network. To modernize, the custom can seem theatrical, but to the families involved, theatre was part of the power. The palace gave the ritual its glow. The monarchy lent old prestige to a social world already under pressure from money empire newspapers and changing ideas about rank. By the early 20th century, the ceremony had become both glamorous and oddly fragile. It depended on everyone agreeing that the bow still mattered. And once a custom depends on belief, its rules become even more important. The most important part of becoming a debutante was not the palace bow. It was the invisible permission that came with it. In British upper-class society, a young woman did not simply appear wherever she wished. She was introduced. She was vouched for. She was guided through a world where every invitation carried meaning. This was the custom known as coming out. The phrase did not originally mean a private revelation of identity. In this setting, it meant entering adult social life. A debutante was coming out into society, and society was deciding whether to receive her. The process could begin long before the formal events. Families arranged lessons in dancing, conversation, posture, and etiquette. A young woman was expected to know how to move through a crowded room, how to greet the right people, and how to avoid appearing too eager or too distant. The rules were not always written down. That made them harder to learn. A mother aunt or another respectable woman often acted as a sponsor or guide. Reputation mattered. So did family background. Wealth could help, but it did not always substitute for acceptance. The system mixed manners with social gatekeeping. The court presentation gave official shine to that process. Afterward came the round of balls and dinners. Some were grand, some were private, some mattered because of who attended, rather than what happened there. At its heart, the season was a marriage market, though not only that, it was also a system of alliances. Families met families. Young men and women met under supervision. Newspapers sometimes reported the names and fashions of debutantes, turning private social rank into public spectacle. The strange detail, is that the custom made youth feel formal. A debutante might be 18 or 19, but she was moving through rituals older than herself, by centuries. She entered rooms dressed in white under the watch of elders carrying the expectations of her family. The individual moment was wrapped inside a social machine. It was elegant for some, restrictive for others, and it was never available equally. Many people in Britain lived entirely outside this world, reading about it from a distance if they noticed it at all. That distance mattered, because by the mid-20th century, a growing number of people began to question why a palace ceremony should mark social legitimacy at all. The custom still glittered, but the old agreement beneath it was starting to crack. In 1958, one of Britain's most polished social rituals came to an official end. That year, the last debutantes were presented at court. The disappearance did not happen because one ball failed or one generation forgot how to curtsy. It happened because the world around the ritual had changed. After the Second World War, Britain was different. Old estates were under financial pressure. Servants were harder to find. Taxation, education work, and mass media were reshaping class life. The idea that a young woman needed court approval to enter society felt increasingly out of step. There was also the problem of appearance. Court presentation had always been selective by the 1950s. That selectiveness looked less like tradition to some observers and more like exclusion. Newspapers and commentators could treat debutantes with fascination, but also with satire. The ritual was easy to romanticize and easy to mock. Queen Elizabeth II, early in her reign, inherited the custom rather than invented it. The surviving accounts suggest that the decision to end formal presentations was part of a wider effort to modernize court life and reduce an increasingly burdensome ceremony. The exact balance of motives is best stated carefully. It was not just one reason. It was a custom losing its place, so the palace door closed on the old form, but the social world did not vanish overnight. Debutante balls continued in different forms. Some became charity events. Some survived as private traditions. In other countries, versions of debutante culture carried on with their own meanings. But the British court presentation, the moment when a young woman's social arrival was sealed, before the monarch was gone. What replaced it was less ceremonial and more scattered. Universities, careers, newspapers, television, private parties, and changing ideas about independence all offered different routes into adulthood. Status did not disappear. Networks did not disappear. But the old choreography lost its authority. That is what makes vanished customs so revealing. They rarely vanish because people suddenly stop liking ceremony. They vanish when the ceremony no longer explains the world. The debutante's bow had once condensed rank family, gender monarchy, and ambition into a few careful movements. Then, almost quietly, those movements became historical. A custom that had helped define who belonged became a reminder that belonging itself can be rewritten.